There come a time when the nation is more important than an individual.
Kenya is moving. Power is shifting.
Siasa, sera, sarakasi.
Ni pumbafu kabisa.
This is Politikali Wiki Hii,
where we don't just tell you what happened, we tell you what it means.
We cut through the noise and follow the power.
Tunataka kushare power. Even when the headlines move fast,
the power behind them moves faster.
Power iko kwa wananchi.
Every week we break down the politics.
The policies, the intrigues, the history, the context.
And the powers shaping Kenya.
Because how are we going to implement our policies if we don't have power?
7 big stories, 1 national conversation.
I am Chaka Sichangi,
aka the Bishop. And I am Diana Ngao,
aka Madam Speaker.
And we are politically connected.
Leo hii tujadiliane mambo ya afya, mambo ya SHA na SHIF, a constitutional healthcare promise and what it costs to keep it. Let's begin where this story actually begins, with the Constitution. Article 43 guarantees every person the right to the highest attainable standard of health. This is not an aspirational declaration. This is a right a citizen can take to court, and a right a state is constitutionally obligated to fulfill. The Social Health Authority was, in its foundational design, Kenya's most ambitious attempt to honor this promise. We should begin by holding that clearly. But the history also matters. NHIF, which served Kenya for more than 6 decades, having been established by an Act of Parliament in June 1966 before being replaced by SHA in 2024. It is documented as the oldest government insurance scheme in Africa. It was, however, selective, built for formal sector workers with predictable payslips. Informal workers, however, subsistence farmers, small traders, majority of Kenyans navigated illness largely outside the insurance architecture almost entirely. The Social Health Insurance Act of 2023 was a deliberate rupture with that tradition. One fund, no exclusions by employment category. Hakuna kubagua. One constitutional standard of care for every Kenyan regardless of how they earn. That ambition is morally serious, constitutionally mandated, and genuinely difficult as a governance standard. At handover, around November 2024, millions of NHIF claims valued at over 30 billion shillings remained unresolved. Hospitals were locked out of legacy data systems, and the new platform had not been stress tested at scale. What the law anticipated as a preparation window was treated in practice as a countdown to launch. The distance between those two interpretations has been borne every day since by patients. What do we mean? The Auditor-General released her report. Almost 50 billion in irregular, unsupported, fraudulent transactions. Not alleged, documented. 9 categories of irregularities. 26.8 billion in claims with no supporting documentations. 7.3 billion in payments for services outside the benefit framework. $500 million in unapproved or repeat surgical procedures. The ministerial framing of transitional teething is constitutionally inadequate at that scale. Article 43 does not guarantee a transitional standard of health. It guarantees the highest attainable one. The High Court on March 18, 2026, through Justice Bahati Mwamoyo's decision, made a distinction. The SHIF legislative framework was upheld as constitutional. However, what the court found unconstitutional was the rollout. The government launched in October 2024 before the necessary administrative and technological infrastructure was in place. In the judge's own words, this was not a mere administrative inconvenience. It was a failure that implicated the state's obligations to respect, promote, protect, and fulfill the right to health. The violation engaged not just Article 43, but Article 28, the right to human dignity. A healthcare system that turns patients away at the door does not merely fail a service standard, it violates their constitutional personhood. Both the court and the Auditor-General converge on the same structural fault: the IT infrastructure. The 104 billion system, the engine through which SHA authorizes every payment and verifies every claim. It was awarded to a consortium, which included Safaricom, Convergence Network Solutions, and Apero Limited. Justice Mwamuye flagged serious transparency failures in that procurement. He declined to nullify the contract. His reasoning was it would disrupt health services to 18.7 million Kenyans. But he did order that enhanced oversight and mandatory compliance steps be put in place. The deeper problem remains. The IP sits with the private consortium, and a clause bars the Kenyan state from building any competing system. The private consortium recovers its investment through percentage charges on member contributions for over a decade. KOTU's Francis Atwoli, who sits on the board, confirmed publicly that the state does not control this IT system. When payment authorization for a national health fund operates outside state sovereignty, every service denial and every unpaid hospital bill is a downstream consequence of that single design decision. SHIF collected almost 60 billion. However, it disbursed almost 97 billion, a structural deficit of 39 billion. And 99% of contributions come from formally employed workers. But the informal sector, the very population this system was built to reach, contributed just under 6 billion. That is not a registration problem, it is a design problem. These are the places where the gap between constitutional promise and lived reality become a personal reckoning. Justice Mwamuye's order requires a joint remediation plan from the Ministry of Health, from the Social Health Authority, and Treasury within 3 months, guaranteeing no denial of emergency treatment and introducing genuine means testing for informal workers. Quarterly progress reports follow for a full year. SHIF now operates under direct judicial supervision. As the judge put it, universal health coverage cannot merely be proclaimed. It must be delivered in a manner that respects the dignity, health, and trust of the people. The Auditor-General has highlighted what is broken. The court has set the clock. Article 43 remains a constitutional obligation.
You've heard all about SHA. The second most important conversation is Raila's legacy and the ODM rupture. What the party's identity crisis tells us about our democratic health. Since October 15th, 2025, Raila's legacy and the future of ODM has been part and parcel of our national conversation, whether you're an ODM member or not. And 23 weeks later, today, the party he built is in the middle of a full-blown identity crisis, one that has spilled well beyond the party lines into a national debate. On one side, we have Linda Ground. On the other side, we have Linda Mwananchi. And somewhere in between, an unseen hand pulling at the seams of what was once Kenya's most formidable opposition machinery. And then there's this, a sitting president, the leader of a ruling party, publicly reminding us that he too was a founding member of ODM, and he has a stake in where the party goes next. Let that sit for a moment. The power struggle, the competing narratives, and the bigger question on who really owns ODM after Raila. But before we go there, let's take a step back from the noise around ODM and ask an even bigger question. Because what's happening inside the party right now is important not just for ODM members and supporters. It's actually a live demonstration of how our democratic institutions cope with succession, generation transition, and the context between pragmatism and principle. ODM has been the most consequential opposition force in Kenya's democratic history. The founding energy and its role in the 2010 constitutional movement, its repeated mobilization of millions of Kenyans across ethnic and regional lines. That record is real. It's unbogable. So when a party of that significance faces an existential identity question, what happens inside it matters to the broader health of Kenya's democratic ecosystem. Here is a core tension, stated plainly. Following Raila's passing, ODM faces two futures. The first is an institutional accommodation, an arranged marriage that provides the comfort and privilege of being in government, maintaining the access to state resources and patronage, remaining a viable but bounded political actor within coalition architecture. The second is reformist opposition, building from where Baba Raila Odinga left the party, his apprentices and political base. ODM being the only party that fielded a presidential candidate in 4 consecutive elections, yani 2 decades, can surely stand firm on its own to once again field a presidential candidate worthy to contest the incumbent and create a third force. These are not equally easy paths. The first offers certainty and access. The second offers purpose and risk. And the faction aligned to each path has made publicly stated non-retractable commitments that make compromise increasingly difficult. The party's constitutional dimension is genuine and worth understanding. The NEC decision to restrict the March 27th National Delegates Conference to ratifying current interim leadership, which is Oburu's being the party leader and Omanyo as Secretary General, rather than holding contested election, raises a fundamental question about where sovereignty inside the political party ultimately resides. Does it live in the executive committee or in the 3,000 delegates popularly mandated at the NDC? That is not a trivial question or a procedural question. It is the same democratic question the citizens ask their national government, played in a miniature inside the political party. The Raila legacy dimension adds emotional complexity that no institutional framework can fully absorb. Sifuna's public charge, "You have betrayed your late brother," is not a political argument. It's a moral claim about custodianship. And Winnie Odinga's emergence as a candidate allied to the Oburu Odinga camp introduces a dynamic that places Raila's political legacy and Raila's own family on opposite sides of the context, with citizens who loved and followed him are asked to choose between the two. The broader national insight here is this: a healthy democracy requires a healthy opposition, not just a political counterbalance, but as the institutional vehicle through which citizens who do not support the government can be represented, protected, and heard. An ODM that resolves this contest with clarity, democratic legitimacy serves Kenya's democratic health, regardless of which faction prevails. An ODM that fractures into competing legal claims and parallel conventions without resolution weakens the institutional fabric that all of us, a governing party supporters and opposition supporters alike, depend on. The coming weeks will say something important about that, about whether Kenya's political institutions can manage contested succession with democratic integrity. The answer will reverberate well beyond ODM.
Mzee Moi used to say, na hiyo ni maendeleo. Leo tuongelele maendeleo. Let's start with a question that doesn't get asked nearly enough. Not are the deals we're witnessing good or bad, but something deeper, more foundational. What kind of country are we building? And do we, citizens, policymakers, parliament, the public, all share the same answer? Because Kenya is at a genuinely consequential economic crossroads right now. And the decisions being made in a remarkably compressed window of time will shape the architecture of this country's prosperity for generations. That is not hyperbole. It is arithmetic, political arithmetic. Consider what has happened in just the past few weeks. Uganda's national oil company secured a 20.15% stake in Kenya Pipeline Corporation. 2 board seats, veto rights over CEO appointments, veto rights over tariff changes, and veto rights over dividend policy and share capital decisions. The National Infrastructure Fund was also signed into law, a vehicle to mobilize up to 5 trillion shillings from domestic pension funds and sovereign wealth. Also, Mombasa and Lamu port berths were announced for private operation, a landlord model. A Nation Media Group, East Africa's largest independent media house, is navigating a complex ownership transition whose full implications for editorial independence are still being unpacked. Now, here's why this conversation matters. The government's core argument deserves genuine engagement because, in many respects, government is right. Kenya faces an annual infrastructure financing gap of almost $500 billion, 520 billion estimated. Foreign debt is consuming a structurally significant share of ordinary revenue before any single school is funded. Yani, tunashinda tumelipa madeni. The National Infrastructure Fund's proposition, finance Kenya's future with Kenyan savings rather than foreign borrowing, is not only defensible, it is at its heart a patriotic idea. And it is one Kenya should pursue with ambition, embracing it with both hands. But patriotism also requires asking the hard questions. And the KPC deal raises one directly. Uganda accounted for roughly 35% of pipeline volume, so its participation had commercial logic. Keeping Uganda in the pipeline is good regional policy. But here's the detail that demands scrutiny. Uganda threatened to withdraw from the IPO. And without Uganda's commitment, the offering risked collapse. Less than half the target had been subscribed. Kenya needed the deal to work. Uganda knew this. And the concessions it extracted, including the board seats, the CEO veto, the tariff veto, the dividend veto, reflect their negotiating power. The question, therefore, is not whether Uganda should be a partner. The question is, what exactly did we trade? What did we give up? And did we trade it and give it up with both our eyes open? There is a distinction in public finance management that is worth making here. There's a difference between privatizing inefficiency on the one hand versus monetizing strategic capacity on the other. Selling assets that underperform and drain resources is defensible. However, converting well-functioning national infrastructure into financial instruments, infrastructure whose returns were previously shared broadly as public goods, requires a much higher standard of public justification. Because once those returns change hands, they compound and snowball for decades in a direction that may potentially be out of our control if we're not careful. Here is the genuinely optimistic reading available to Kenya right now. We are not the first country to navigate this tension between mobilizing private capital and protecting sovereign assets. The countries that have done it well, Singapore, Australia, Canada, share one thing. They had a clear, publicly articulated, democratically endorsed framework for which assets could move into which hands and under what conditions. and with what protections? Kenya has the institutions to build that framework. Parliament is functional. Civil society is active. Tuko na maandamano. Citizens are, as anyone listening to our radio stations will confirm, extraordinarily analytical and deeply invested in this country's future. The national development model we deserve is not one that chooses between state control and private capital. It is one that establishes openly, with evidence on the table, the principles governing both. That conversation is what separates a development model from a series of transactions. Kenya deserves a good development model.
We, yes, you in the camera. Umechukua kura? Uko kadi? Ofisi za IEBC unajua pali ziko? This and so many of such questions have been flooding our online platforms, has been flooding our conversations. It just shows that the civic energy is building, but is IEBC ready to receive it? If elections were to be held today, would IEBC be ready? Something significant is happening in Kenya's civic space right now that doesn't get enough attention because it tends to be crowded by the more hot political stories. But it might be the most consequential one than any of them. An entire generation is preparing to vote for the first time. And the institution that needs to be ready to receive them is facing its own serious structural questions. The Gen Z, who mobilized with extraordinary precision and moral clarity during the 2024 Finance Bill protests, are now turning their organization energy towards electoral participation. Nationwide voter registration pushes are citizen-led and are being coordinated digitally ahead of the IEBC's mass registration window scheduled for March 30th. The same network that circulated protest routes, documented state responses, are now circulating IEBC locations and registration requirements. The civic energy is genuine and substantial. This matters enormously for 2027. The Kenya's presidential election are decided at the margins. Just take a look at 2022, where the margin was just 200,000 votes. Youth voter turnout, particularly in urban centers and among first-time voters, has historically been a variable that analysts struggle most to predict. A Gen Z cohort that both registers in large numbers and turns out to vote, motivated by the same civic seriousness that drove the Finance Bill response, changes the electoral calculus in ways no party or analyst can fully model in advance. Here is the national concern that deserves clear and honest attention beyond the politics. The IEBC, the institution that needs to be ready to receive this civic energy, is facing a set of institutional and financial challenges that, if left unaddressed, can create a serious mismatch between the civic enthusiasm and the IEBC capacity. The Commission has submitted a budget request in a range of 61.7 and 63 billion Kenya shillings to conduct the 2027 elections. With the current Treasury allocation constraints, a funding gap appears likely. Also, the Commission carries a 4.2 billion Kenya shillings in pending legal bills from the previous electoral cycles. Liabilities that can constrain the operational flexibility before even a single 2027 shilling is spent. Then there's the most critical issue: the 45,000 KIMS kit that formed the technological backbone of 2022's electoral verification system. They all need to be replaced at an estimated cost of 6.1 billion. These biometric devices, through which millions of Kenyans will verify their identities on election day, if they are not replaced, the technological infrastructure and the electoral credibility is vulnerable. This to mean that hata kama uko kadi, sisi sote kimskit haitatutambua. Here is the insight worth sitting with. The most dangerous threat to Kenya's 2027 electoral legitimacy is not a stolen election. It is the preemptive delegitimized one. Imagine an election that significant numbers of the citizens have already decided is compromised before the first vote is cast, because the institution conducting it visibly lacked the resources, the independence, and the operational capacity to conduct it credibly. That narrative, once it's seeded, is almost impossible to uproot after the fact. It is only preventable before the fact. The IEBC's financial and operational independence is therefore not an administrative matter. It is a democratic security question. An institution that is underfunded relative to the constitutional mandate, carrying debt from previous cycles and operating with aging verification tech gadgets cannot project the confidence that a hotly contested election requires. And in an environment where both the governing party and the opposition have already begun framing institutional processes through a legitimacy lens, the IEBC operational solidity is one of the few neutral variables that can anchor civic trust. Kenya's 2027 election is 505 days away. The civic energy to make it meaningful is already building. The institutional infrastructure to honor that energy needs to be built with the same urgency. And it needs to be built now, not in months when the campaign has already consumed all the available oxygen. This is a national responsibility. It belongs to all of us.
Money, money, money. Ain't it funny? In a rich man's world. Let's talk about the national balance sheet as a story about choices. Because that is what a budget is. It is not just numbers on a page. It is a statement about priorities. And right now, Kenya's fiscal choices are telling us something important about the kind of state we are trying to build. Start with State House and the state lodges. There's a serious, even admirable argument behind some of the current spending. President Ruto has made these spaces far more accessible than they were under his predecessors, regularly using Eldoret, Sagana, and Kisumu for meetings and official engagements. He has turned State House into the people's house because it is ours. Yet, in one sense, that is a democratic instinct. It suggests a presidency trying to be visible, mobile, and accessible, not locked away in Nairobi, but politically and administratively present across the country. Politics is, after all, a contact sport. And in this season, that visibility is not accidental. Kenya is moving unmistakably into heavy political weather. The president is traversing the country, hosting grassroots leaders at Sagana, county delegations at Eldoret, diplomats in Nairobi, and turning the office of the presidency into a national contact point as politics becomes once again a full contact sport. That is a political reality. We should be honest enough to say so. Next year, chaguzi. But honesty also requires the second half of the sentence. Accessibility is a public good. Fiscal prudence and cost discipline are also public goods. Treasury's 2025-2026 estimates set aside $2.3 billion to renovate and upgrade State House and state lodges, with about $900 million specifically earmarked for rehabilitation works. Of that, about $680 million goes to State House Nairobi, with additional allocations for Eldoret, Sagana, Mombasa, Nakuru, Kisumu, Kakamega, and Kisii. This sits on top of a long-running refurbishment program that began 2015 and is projected to cost $11.5 billion by 2026-2027. At the same time, State House expenditure for the current year rose from an initial allocation of roughly $8 billion to about $17 billion through supplementary spending. So the national question is not whether the president should use these spaces. Of course he should. The state should be seen and felt. The presidency should be felt beyond Nairobi. The real question is, what is the right cost of an accessible presidency in a fiscally constrained republic? Because this is not happening in a vacuum. KEMSA is still owed 7.6 billion, weakening the public health supply chain. Secondary schools face 26.6 billion in shortfalls against the government's own free education commitment. Treasury is still managing a debt burden so heavy that in the first half of the financial year, more than 70% of collected revenue went to debt service before other priorities could be funded. That is why this conversation matters. The challenge is not to retreat into easy outrage and not to deny the logic of a presidency that is more mobile, more public, and more politically engaged. The challenge is to ask the question a serious country must ask. How do we build a presidency that is visible to the people without allowing the cost of visibility to outrun the discipline the times demand? That is not an anti-government question. It is a pro-state question. It is a pro-Kenya question. And it is exactly the kind of question a confident republic should be able to ask calmly, patriotically, and in full public view. Ahadi za siasa inasemekana usiweke kwa roho, weka kwa lungs. Let us shift the conversation to the social contract. Promises made, promises kept, promises broken. A conversation about the relationship between the state and its citizens, about what government is for, about the promises that public institutions make, and the conditions under which those promises can be kept. Kenya's government has been making significant, visible commitments: free primary and secondary education, universal health coverage, teacher employment, CBC, food security and irrigation, Galana Kulalu, major infrastructure, roads, airports, Shirika la Reli la Kenya, LAPSSET. Those are not small ambitions. They reflect a government that has staked its legacy on tangible improvements. That seriousness of intent deserves to be acknowledged. And it's precisely because the intent appears genuine that the implementation gaps deserve the most serious national conversation, not as indictment, but as diagnosis. Secondary schools face 26.6 billion shortfall against the free education funding commitment. The Court of Appeal has declared the teacher internship program unconstitutional, leaving 44,000 teachers in limbo, and CBC junior secondary schools understaffed. KEMSA cannot fully supply public hospital shelves because it is owed 7.6 billion by the very government institutions it is mandated to serve. Kenya ranks 103rd out of 123 countries on the Global Hunger Index, with 37% of citizens food insecure. Now here is where the analysis deserves precision. There are two different types of governance challenge. The first is the performance gap, when a government makes genuine commitments but delivers them late or incompletely. That is frustrating, and it is correctable, though through enhanced implementation. The second is a structural gap, when the architecture of the system itself, regardless of effort, cannot meet the commitments the system has made. Debt service consuming 2/3 of ordinary revenue before services are funded is a structural gap. SHA, whose payment authorization infrastructure is not state-controlled, is a structural gap. KEMSA being owed billions by the government departments it supplies is a structural gap.
Gachagua has found the president's activation code. And now, every political adversary in the country has it too. Lean in. Let me explain. To a lot of people, This foul spat has between the former political allies Ruto and Gachagua. They have framed it as a political communication problem, but it is not. It is something structurally more revealing, a more consequential than the communication problem. And understanding the difference matters. Last week, President Ruto wrapped a 5-day development tour in Western Kenya. Smart move. 500 days to an election, you go there, you show up, you launch real things. A 232 million shilling water project and a 860 million shilling road. Electrification for over 25,000 households. That's the kind of week that campaigns itself. But that's not the week we got. Instead, the entire news cycle was consumed by the personal slugfest between the president and the former deputy president Gachagua. Body shaming, murder allegations, and attacks on each other's families from the official state platforms. The Standard newspaper called it unpresidential. And the verdict did not come from the opposition. It came from people who support his agenda. So what actually happened? Here is the analytical frame. A communication failure is the wrong message, the wrong medium, or the wrong audience. You can fix that with a strategy review. What happened in Cheptais was structurally different. It was a lack of self-control triggered by an identity assault. Gachagua didn't just attack the president's policies, he attacked his identity, his body, his dignity, and from a church pulpit. And political psychology is clear. When a leader's identity is under assault, strategy disappears and the instinct to hit back appears. Gachagua has figured out that sufficiently personal provocation will reliably pull the president off the development terrain onto a personality terrain where he's exposed. And the code is now public knowledge. And the reason the code works every time comes down to one structural reality. The presidency has one asymmetric advantage over every other single political actor: height. Only the president speaks from the nation and not within it. The rest of the leaders speak from the communities, from their grievances, from their ambitions. That institutional height is the president's greatest competitive asset, but it is only available when the president actually occupies it. The moment he descends to a fight at the opponent's level and keeps descending voluntarily, he surrenders the one thing that they can't manufacture. But let's zoom out a bit, because this isn't just one bad week. This is about the kind of political culture we're normalizing 500 days before an election. Chapter 6 of the Constitution of Kenya is clear. National leadership demands integrity, it demands discipline, it demands objectivity, and it demands accountability. Article 73 does not just suggest these values, it requires them of anyone holding state office. The presidency, most of all. When the holder of the highest office of the land repeatedly meets provocation with personal attacks, it doesn't only damage one news cycle. It sets the ceiling for every other political actor in the country. If the president can body shame the opponent from a state platform, what exactly are we telling the governors, the senators, and the MCAs they can't do? The behavior at the top becomes the permission structure at every other level. And that's a red flag. 500 days out to a general election, the tone of the contest is being set right now. Not in 2027, now. This is where thicker skin stops being personal advice and becomes a constitutional obligation. The presidency is not a personality, it is an institution. And institutions don't flinch. They don't trade insults, they hold their position. A president who can be pulled off his seat of power by a well-placed provocation is a president who has handed his adversaries the remote control. Let's be clear. The rally and the crowds, they love it. They always do. But the rally applause measures entertainment and not strategy. The leader in their WhatsApp groups and the living rooms was saying something totally different. They were saying 2007. Many of us remember. And in the distance between presidential personal attack and ethnic mobilization is shorter than it looks from the podium. The most powerful move right now isn't better clapbacks. It is silence from height. The projects are real. The microphones are still there, and the constitution is clear. The question is, will the next days be defined by what was built, by who got the last word, or by the precedents we allow to set while we are busy being entertained? Understanding that distinction matters because the remedies are different. The performance gap is fixed with accountability and urgency. A structural gap requires redesign. And the risk of misdiagnosing the second type as the first is that you keep applying urgency to a design problem and wonder why the numbers don't improve. There is a testimony from this period that captures the moral weight of this better than any analytical frame. A citizen asks, "We are keen to know just how much someone's life is worth in Kenya. How do you validate that this much is what you are capable of giving for a life lost?" That is not a political question. It is a question that every state in every generation is asked by its most vulnerable citizens. And the honest answer to it requires more than good intention. It requires the willingness to look at the architecture of healthcare financing, of education funding, of food security infrastructure, of public service delivery, and ask not just whether we are trying hard enough, but whether the system we built is capable of doing what we promised it would. Kenya has human capital, institutional knowledge, and a civic energy to answer that question well. The Gen Z are currently registering to vote for the first time carry that expectation explicitly. They did not march against the finance bill to demand a smaller government. They marched for a more honest, more accountable, and more effective one. And that demand is legitimate. It is patient, but not indefinitely patient. And if the most important political signal of the pre-election period, not the party factionalism, not the personal political combat, but the quiet, determined civic insistence that Kenya can do better, and the willingness to show up at the voter registration desk as evidence of that belief. A new Kenya will not be built by noise alone. It will be built by citizens who understand how the landscape is shifting.
Nations are shaped in moments such as these by those who can read change, name it, and rise to meet it.
So stay informed and stay engaged.
Stay on top of the politics.
Stay politically connected.